Some time ago, I watched a documentary. It was about the history of how humanity has caught fish and used them as food. In that documentary, one unusual fishing method was introduced. The method was very simple. Each person held a roughly woven fish trap made from tree branches. The trap was open at both the top and the bottom. While walking through a reservoir or a rice field, the person would press the trap downward from above. If a fish happened to be trapped inside, the person would catch it with bare hands and place it in a bag hanging at the side. At a glance, the success rate seemed quite high. It looked as if they were catching 3 or 4 fish per minute. That method did not use a cutting-edge fish detector. It did not use an expensive fishing rod, and it did not even use a net. Yet the method was very effective. At that moment, I was quite surprised. Watching this fishing method, which looked simple but was very efficient, I realized something. Fish can be caught in a way like that. When the range is narrowed, the ability of humans, or the efficiency of using human ability, can increase very dramatically. There is another example. It is a mosquito that has entered a mosquito net. Have you ever tried catching a mosquito flying around inside a room with your hand? Inside a room, there may be objects that prevent us from focusing on the mosquito. The mosquito may fly to higher places, and sometimes it flies behind objects. These days, I often fail when I try to catch a mosquito flying inside the room with my hand. However, a mosquito that has accidentally entered a mosquito net is different. When it comes to a mosquito that has entered the mosquito net, I am much stronger. If you look carefully inside the mosquito net, you can quickly find it, and the probability of catching it with your hand becomes higher. Catching a fish swimming in water with bare hands. Catching a mosquito flying in the air with bare hands. When the range is narrowed, these things become possible. However, is this only a story about catching fish with bare hands? Is it merely a story about catching mosquitoes with bare hands? For example, imagine that there are many objects on a desk. In fact, our brain is continuously receiving information about those objects, and unconsciously it keeps thinking about them, whether to ignore those messy objects or to deal with them. Have you ever had a vague thought like this in your mind? I really should organize all those things. I have had that experience. I have an INTP tendency, and neatly organizing things may not be easy for me. In fact, I am someone who has struggled with tidying and organizing. Even now, it is difficult for me to speak confidently about organizing. However, I discovered one method. It is simply narrowing the range. For example, suppose there are many objects on the desk, such as books, pens, cups, tissues, a phone, pencils, erasers, and ink bottles. I gather my hands into a circle and make a small round shape. It means that for now, I will only look at this small area. Depending on the situation, or depending on the number of objects, the range formed by my hands can be made narrower or wider. And within that range, I choose one word. In fact, it is not absolutely necessary to choose only one. It is also fine to choose 2 or 3 words. The key is a decision in the mind. Therefore, even just one word can be sufficiently effective. For example, the word pen. In my case, I repeat it about 5 times. The volume of the voice is not very important. It is also fine even if you repeat it in a soft voice. Pen, 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 like this. Then, that single word acts like a kind of condensation nucleus. I reach out my hand to put the pen away. But it is not only the pen that gets moved. The book, cup, tissue, phone, pencil, eraser, and ink bottle next to it also naturally get organized together. I only decided to organize one thing, yet a flow appears in which several surrounding things become organized together. Isn't that surprising? This may be one of the mysterious workings of our brain. Wow, even I, an INTP, can organize things. For me, it was an experience almost like a miracle, something to give thanks to God for. In fact, organizing and tidying up is not a painful task. If we think about it carefully, organizing may even be more enjoyable than playing a computer game. Think about computer games. A game is a process of solving problems and difficulties that appear randomly, one by one. It is a process of solving a kind of challenge. However, there is a reason why organizing can sometimes be more interesting than a computer game. Organizing does not only use the mind, it also involves moving the body. Of course, in order to organize things, we have to move around. We move objects, walk back and forth, and use our hands. This is not a bad thing. On the contrary, it is good for our health. Organizing things in a house or an office can become a light exercise that uses both the brain and the body. It can become a comfortable kind of activity that uses both our mind and our body together. There is no need to deliberately make your room messy and then try to organize it again. There are two reasons for this. First, during the course of life, things that need to be organized naturally continue to appear. Human activities leave many kinds of results, and among them, there are things that require tidying and organizing. For example, after enjoying a good meal, we need to wash the dishes and organize the kitchen. Second, what we humans living in the 21st century need to organize is not only our desks, rooms, or houses. Of course, this may differ from person to person, but a considerable number of modern people face another huge object that needs to be organized. It is the files and folders that accumulate inside computers and mobile phones. About organizing the files and folders of computers and mobile phones, I will talk about that another time as a new topic. The files and folders of people living in the 21st century, this is another huge topic. When I think about it carefully, the reason I felt despair about organizing and felt suffering in life was not simply the act of organizing itself. It was psychological fear and the feeling of not knowing how to solve the situation. Because of the scattered objects in the room, I sometimes felt a vague sense of fear. So I prayed to God. If we know the method to deal with a painful task, if we know how to solve it, the level of suffering becomes much smaller. The levels of frustration, despair, and depression can decrease, and we can handle our work in our own enjoyable way. The same is true for organizing. In fact, when we organize things one by one, a sense of accomplishment can arise. Yes, that is right. It is possible to feel gratitude and even joy while organizing things. There is proof of this. You know puzzles, right? Most of us have probably had the experience of doing puzzles. Sometimes we borrow puzzles from a library or even buy them with money. Yes, some of us have even paid money to buy puzzles. In a sense, we buy messiness with money, something that simply consumes our time. Yet, in another sense, we buy the possibility of a beautiful picture that will appear when the puzzle is finally completed. At the same time, we are training ourselves in patience, reasoning, and imagination. Anyway, we borrow or buy puzzles, and then we pour the puzzle pieces randomly onto the desk. And while putting together the scattered pieces, do we not feel a certain calmness, a sense of accomplishment, and even happiness? I know, and I apologize. I admit that I may have explained the situation too simply. In reality, there are much bigger problems in our lives. Financial problems, health problems, job problems, moving problems, housing problems, marriage problems or divorce problems, tax problems, caring for elderly parents, caring for children, unexpected incidents and accidents, and so on. Because of these issues, overwhelming fear, worry, and anxiety can sometimes come upon us. Still, in a way, this may be an expanded version of organizing a desk, or an expanded version of puzzle pieces scattered everywhere. Yes, that is right. Sometimes our lives may feel like puzzle pieces scattered across the floor. Yes, on the floor, not even on a desk. But we can pray to God. We can recognize such problems in life as things that need to be organized and dealt with, rather than as things that pull us down into depression. Yes, we can pray to God and come out of depression. We must discover hope in God. Here is the summary of today's story. 1. When the range is narrowed, human processing ability can increase. 2. More than the act of organizing itself, psychological fear or a vague sense of being overwhelmed can make organizing and tidying feel difficult. 3. However, the actual act of organizing can be an enjoyable process. 4. Sometimes our lives may feel like puzzle pieces scattered across the floor, but we can pray to God. Thank you for listening to this story.